David does not let the war cry of the opening verses settle into silence. He moves from God's power over enemies to God's character toward his people, and the transition is everything. Sing unto God, sing praises to his name. Extol him that rideth upon the heavens by his name Jah, and rejoice before him. Psalm 68, verse 4. The command to sing appears twice in the same verse. David does not say, sing once and move on. He doubles the command, pressing the congregation into active, sustained worship. This is not background music. This is the full voice of God's people, directed at God himself. David gives the name, not just God, but Jah. This is a form of Yahweh, the covenant name God revealed to Moses at the burning bush. It appears rarely in the Psalms, making its presence here deliberate and weighty. David is not calling Israel to worship a vague deity or a general concept of divine power. He calls them to worship the God who made promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who parted the Red Sea, who fed Israel in the wilderness, and who spoke from Sinai. The name carries the entire history of God's faithfulness. The title, Him that rideth upon the heavens, places God above every created thing. David applies the language to Yahweh, stripping every idol of the description and returning it to its rightful owner. The God who rides upon the heavens is not Baal. He is Jah. He is the covenant God of Israel, and he alone occupies that position. The command to rejoice before him closes the verse, returning to the same phrase from verse 3. Rejoicing before God is not a mood. It is a deliberate act of standing in God's presence with gladness because of who he is. A father of the fatherless and a judge of the widows is God in his holy habitation. Psalm 68, verse 5. The verse stops the momentum of cosmic language and brings it to the ground. God rides upon the heavens in verse 4. In verse 5, he bends down to the fatherless child and the widow. David places the most exalted description of God next to the most vulnerable members of society to show that God's greatness does not produce distance. It produces care. The fatherless had no legal advocate in the ancient world. Without a father, a child had no one to represent him in disputes, no inheritance, and no protection from exploitation. The widow occupied the same exposed position. She had no husband to speak for her, no one to defend her property or her person against those who would take advantage of her grief. God declares himself the Father of the fatherless, not a distant patron, but a father. He takes the relational title and applies it to those who have no one. He declares himself the judge of the widows, meaning he stands in court on their behalf, taking up their cause where no human advocate exists. The Lord does this from his holy habitation, from the very place where his glory dwells, showing that his throne is not too high to hear the cry of the most overlooked person in society. God setteth the solitary in families. He bringeth out those which are bound with chains, but the rebellious dwell in a dry land. Psalm 68, verse 6. God places the isolated into families. The solitary person, cut off from community and belonging, does not remain alone because God sees his condition and acts. He sets them in families, creating belonging where none existed. God also brings out those bound with chains. The image is a prison, and God functions as the one who opens the door and leads the captive into freedom and prosperity.